You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
I'm sure you've seen it. I don't know if Jacob's seen it. I actually was listening to a brother on the drive in talk about just come out yesterday that Mayor Lightfoot, 60% of the discretionary spending of the COVID relief money that went to Chicago, $300 million went to police.
Oh, no.
And it's like, you're forcing teachers to go back to school. From what I've read, they said that they were going to have these petitions up, but they didn't provide any way of funding for the petition. So it sounded like, from what I read, it sounded like the administrator said, yeah, you may wind up having to buy it yourself if you want partitions for the, but yet we're going to turn around and spend 60% of the funding, the discretionary funding, on cops. And it's like, come on, man. What are you thinking? I mean, it just speaks to the. I've been to Chicago a few times, and I love the city, but I really hate that mayor.
Yeah.
I mean, I really, really hate that mayor.
Yeah. I mean, well, and so let's talk about some of the fights that you've had with the mayor during this time. Like, what have they been, because the thing, obviously the thing that gets thrown is that, y'all don't want to go back to work because you hate having to work and you hate your kids. And like, that's obviously, if you listen to you now, like, you can tell that you've got concern for your children and you want to be able to, like, you want to be able to, like, see them in person and teach like normal. And that's, what you're looking for is not, you just said working remotely is more difficult for you. And so what have y'all been asking for, and what has the administration been giving you? And ultimately y'all did accept an agreement. So let's, talk to us about what the final agreement was. And if anybody's got a question, we can go ahead and queue you up. 1-866-494-9866 if you want to call in. But Kenzo, tell us about the fight that you've been having with the Chicago Public Schools. And you've got about 1 minute before we go to a break. So,
well, David, I'm glad you brought up the police thing, because even beyond that, the school budget had $30 million in there for student resource officers, which are cops in the schools, which we as a union and community groups fought to get taken out because the mayor says we're broke. Why are we, backwards, backdoor funding the CPD through school budgets? Mm-hmm. The city budget also had the police funded through other revenue streams other than, the usual CPD. And now we're seeing that COVID funding. One thing I also want to bring up, $300 million going to the police, $2,000 went to the Office of Disabilities for pandemic funding, $2,000. So these fights over the budget and a people's budget, that has been the core of it for a very long time.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
Welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. On the line, we've got Kenzo Shibata, host of Class Time Pod. He is the functional vice president of the Chicago Teachers Union and an educator himself. We've been talking to him all morning about the Chicago Teachers Union, about the what it's been like being a teacher in the middle of a pandemic. If you've got a question for him or for us, give us a call. 1-866-494-9866 is the number. Again, the number is 1-866-494-9866. So Kenzo, tell us a little bit more about the fight that y'all have had with the reopening agreements. What have y'all been pushing for as the teachers, and what has the administration been trying to get you to do?
So starting the very beginning of this school year, the problem was that the union was demanding that the board sit with us to negotiate what this would look like. And we had real, solid plans about committees that could be formed, like how we could actually work with some of the actual educators that work with the Board of Education to hatch a plan that would work for students. And, I know we had ideas for social emotional learning, which I think is critical right now for a lot of the students that are feeling very isolated. And the board refused to work with us. And, one thing that's really telling recently in an interview with Mayor Lori Lightfoot was that she says, I think that the union is trying to run the schools.
Yeah.
And I think that the CTU has political ambitions. And I'm just like, damn straight. That's what a union is.
Who knows better how to run the schools than the teachers union? Amazing.
But, so I think that went into like a lot of their resistance was they are ideologically opposed to having teachers and, not just teachers, but like paraprofessionals, clinicians, all the folks that we represent actually hatching this policy. So because they created a fight out of it, we wanted it to be cooperative. They, us to work together collaboratively. They turned it into a fight. And then we called for a meeting of our House of Delegates at the end of last summer to talk about a strike. And then the board backed off. They, at that point, I think they were very smartly did not want to have a strike. We didn't want to have a strike. We were fully prepared, but we did not want to either. And they said, okay, distance learning, but they wouldn't give any solid, like, okay, for this year or anything like that. They just said, but as soon as it's safe, we're going to have in-person learning. And so that became like a continuous fight where our union officers were negotiating with the board over, what PPE would look like, what, building cleanliness, social distancing would look like. And I have to say the final agreement that we got is far in a way better than what the board gave us. So like the fact that we were pushing a possible strike, lots of, work actions, our officers working around the clock, negotiating, we got a really good package. I still voted it down. And the reason why is because I've worked for this Board of Education for 17 years, and I know they're not going to implement this with fidelity. Yeah. And lo and behold, that's already the problem.
Well, you just said that 10 years ago you won a nurse in every school. 10 years ago you won a nurse in every school, and you still haven't gotten that implemented.
Well, a year ago we won that.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But we increased the ratio 10 years ago. And that was just never a conversation. So like our ability to fight for it in 2019 started with our 2012 contract fight. But the thing with a nurse in every school is, yes, we agreed with the board to have a phase in over a few years because they cried poor and said we can't hire these nurses right away. But when we said that, we were saying, okay, this is the floor. There's nothing that prevents the board from hiring nurses at a faster rate than they are right now. And had they done that, we'd be in a better position to open up schools. We have schools that are opening without nurses right now. And with, teachers that are mostly not vaccinated yet. This was just not the time. And the negotiations, even though we were negotiating a package to reenter, the bottom line was that we wanted to negotiate on the start date for in-person. And that was something the board was not legally compelled to negotiate over. So they determined that it was going to be immediate, even though they weren't prepared by any means for that. And so we had to take it, I think. Even though I voted down the package and it won by 68%. I think the reason why it won wasn't necessarily that educators trust the board, but they worry about their students. And we worry about our image in the public. That's something I had to talk a few members kind of down off the ledge about, because I'm just like, the parents still like us. It's, these reporters. And not even the local reporters. The local reporters are doing fairly decent work right now. It's MSNBC. It's, Lori Lightfoot can be on Meet the Press and give her talking points. And they never invite union leaders. And all of these things compound on and break down morale. And I think that's why the majority of our teachers took the deal. And we're still fighting now to get it implemented.
Yeah, it's those national Democrats that you spoke about earlier, Rahm Emanuel being one, that now that Biden's elected, everything's wonderful. Everybody can go back to brunch. We can send all the kids back to school, and then hey, it's sickening, is what it is. Yeah, it's absolutely sickening, to the core. God, I hate these people. I know we're on a radio show, and I'm trying not to vent, but God, it's
Well, I mean, you know, I don't think, David, I don't think you follow Kenzo on Twitter, but I mean, he's been having exactly the same kind of reaction, is that like how disgusting it is that these national Democrats are just like, in many cases, now that Biden is elected, they're like, all right, back to brunch. Teachers get back in the classroom, like everything. Let's go back to normal. Nothing is wrong. Yeah. And it's so, you know, and that speaks to, like, you know, MSNBC is supposed to be the liberal thing, but they're a corporate news network, you know, like they are not worker that you just said. Like, that's amazing to me that they won't even try to give the facade of being interested in what the workers are thinking by not even bringing on union leaders to berate them. Like, they won't even give them a platform.
Here's the problem: is it's not just the workers. This is the problem that nobody's talking. I hadn't seen anybody talking about it, but a lot of the children no, I'm not going to say a large majority, but there's certainly a small subsection of children all across the United States. I work with a guy that's 70-something years old, and he's taking care of his grandson who's about, I think he's in kindergarten or first grade. And they say, well, it's not going to affect the kids. No, it may not affect the kids drastically if they get it. But when they bring it home to a 70-year-old grandparent that's supporting them, their only support because their parents are in jail, I mean, it's your constituents. And they know this. They absolutely know it. They're covering it up and hiding all of these talking points. And I don't know for what reason. I have no clue how it benefits them politically to do this. It's just, it's asinine.
Yeah, the situation I'm in, my wife is immunocompromised. She has breast cancer. And so that's like the top of our priority. Like, we are extremely careful. And I just feel like the Board of Education doesn't have any room for like humanity. And that's one thing that's really upsetting. And, you know, one of the things, I immediately applied for a distance teaching exception in the case that they do recall high school teachers. And, you know, it's funny, I got an email saying that was rejected, and that I would have to report back to school. And high school teachers weren't even expected to. So, you know, that part was a mistake. But like, honestly, it was rejected, and they said it was because they have a need for extra teachers. So it was eventually rescinded because it was a mistake. But I'm still on deck in case they do recall high school teachers back to the classroom. What worries me about that is, even though my students overwhelmingly, I don't think are going to sign up for in-person, that as we're part of our agreement with the board for elementary school teachers who have already been called back, was that if you have no students, you can work remotely. So like, if you have 15 second graders and all 15 families work or, you know, apply for or want to have distance learning, then you can teach them distance. And the board is rescinding on that. So I'm assuming they'll do the same to me.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, if all 15 of your students are electing to go to distance learning, like the only point of saying you've got to come into the school is just cruelty and power and showing you like we can do, like we're the boss.
Yeah,
that's the only. There's no. I mean, that's crazy, and y'all are being made out like you're the bad guys. It's insane. It doesn't make any kind of sense at all. And you know, like you mentioned earlier, that most of your poor and black and brown students, they're being trotted out in the media as, oh, the teachers don't care about these marginalized communities because they're the ones that are being hit worst by remote education. Well, they're also the ones that are being hit worst by COVID, and so they are electing by a majority of the folks in these marginalized communities are electing to keep distance learning. And so the audacity to trot them out as a meat shield and throwing them at teachers when they're doing what the majority of these communities want, to keep them safe, to ensure that remote learning is a possibility. I mean, it baffles me. It really, really baffles me.
Yeah, and I think it baffles all of us. I think it's just, you know, I got a brother that I told you about when we came in. His wife's a school teacher. She had to go back to teaching, she come down with COVID just last 3 weeks ago, and he said she had it. And they're a young couple, 2 children, probably about 6 and 8, and he said she was terribly affected by it, and then brought it home to her kids. And it's like, there's no concern for human life, and it's like I said, I don't understand what the political. It's almost like genocide. I don't get it.
Yeah,
I have no clue where the political posturing comes from that this is acceptable.
And like, it definitely was the mayor being like a juggernaut, because as soon as they opened up like the first phase in, which were 50 schools, every school got a case of COVID in it and had to, deal with that. And she's still pushing ahead for all this, even though we have data right now saying, the idea of having a slow phase in was so we look at the data afterwards, like, oh, was this a good idea? It's proven to be a bad idea, but she has a bone to pick with the union. I think that's her bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it sounds like. And like you said, whenever she said last week about it appears that the teachers union wants to take over the education. Okay.
Good.
Yeah. What's the bad part of that? How can we fire your mayor and let the, and let the teachers union start running education? I mean, we talk about it weekly. The workers should run their industry. It's as simple as that.
We tried running Karen Lewis for mayor at one point, but then, cancer sucks, and it took her.
Man, I can't. That's just so. The universe is cruel. Like, I just can't imagine Chicago with Karen Lewis as mayor. That would, talk about being a beacon for the justice and humanity, like New York and LA are supposed to be. They're supposed to be these liberal progressive bastions, and they've all got these corporate Democrats leading them. And Karen Lewis, Mayor Karen Lewis, that would have been that would have been so cool.
There's so much energy. I went to the first canvassing meeting for that. It was in an old church, and there were just hundreds of people there shuffling around with literature. What could have been?
Yeah,
we gotta find our next candidate now.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. Here's an announcement right at the top. The North Alabama DSA is holding a necessities drive every Saturday. That means this Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. at the IBEW local Union Hall, local 558 Union Hall, on Clinton Avenue, right across from Yellowhammer and Campus 805 in Huntsville. So if you're in the area, you want to drop off some clothes, some non-perishable food items, blankets, then swing by the IBEW Union Hall right across from Yellowhammer and Campus 805 from 3 to 5 p.m. this Saturday and every Saturday. Follow at DSA North Alabama on Twitter for more information.
And all of that merchandise is going to the Manor House, so it's being distributed very well, and they really need PPE as well. So if you've got hand sanitizer, go by Costco and support the Teamsters out there, and pick up some hand sanitizer and take it over to them, or some masks.
Yep. So if you want to see what we're up to throughout the week, get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. David is on Twitter at Radical Unionist. That's spelled RADICL Unionist. If you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, you can search YouTube for The Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we clip segments and release them throughout the week. We also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps. So to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We've got a website, thevalleylaborreport.org. And finally, if you appreciate our work and want to help us stay on the air, then consider throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/thevalleylaborreport.